course it does that. All right, and we'll get back to the share and we'll be going live. I want to
All right,
admit
so
everyone that's in the waiting room.
all right.
All right. All right. Hello, everyone out there. I am Thomas Hall, Executive Director of Clean Start, and welcome to another Clean Start Perspective. First off, I want to recognize the sponsors of Clean Start. That's SMUD, our local utility here that has a net zero goal by 2030. Bloom Workspaces, where we host most of our events. Fresno State, the Wet Center. That's where Blue Tech Valley is hosted. And that is the CEC's Innovation Cluster for the Central Valley. Also, River City Bank and Chico Start. And if you want to learn more about Chico Start, I suggest you join us tomorrow at Grow Tech Fest up in Chico. If you can make it, it'll be an exciting event with lots of entrepreneurships and lots of entrepreneurs getting together to discuss, growth and how they're revolutionizing the North State. And with that, I'm going to jump right into our program with Joseph Gallegos. Joseph Gallegos is the founder of Umida Ag, a agriculture company that we met through Blue Tech Valley, and he's also been growing his company through uh, grant funding. So today we're going to talk about grant funding, which is an alternative form of getting capital for your company. It's that sweet, non-dilutive capital, and it can be a little intimidating. But when we talked with Joseph earlier this year, he broke it down in a way that I think really makes a lot of sense. So with that, I'm going to hand it over and highlight Joseph Gallegos to lead us off on this discussion.
Well, hello, everybody. So I just want to go through what I've learned as an entrepreneur and finding grants and then applying for grants. And I'm going to share my screen now and write presentation up. Let's see here. Got the screen up and presentation mode. Where did it disappear to? Oh, there it is. Okay, so my experience, let's go over the agenda really quick. Grants, why? Startup stage, volume, agencies. We're going to kind of go over the overall landscape of grants and, the focus of why the government's giving grants for entrepreneurs. Some tips, some sources where you can look for the grants, how to get a grant ready, simple to start and get to the prototype. On non-dilutive, just as was stated, Thomas says, the government's giving us money to start a company or to discover ideas. And it comes in three phases. Phase one is really that stage where, hey, I got this great idea, but I need some money to create some of the proof of concepts. And that phase is what can go anywhere from 100,000 to 305,000. And this is money that's given to that startup to really kind of get over that discovery stage to, make sure you have that idea that's worked out. And then phase two is more of the prototype, actually taking that idea and creating a prototype that you can show customers to see if, will you buy this? I made this, will you buy it? And then the last stage is more that commercialization. And then from that point on, then you try to get other funding or you start to move on with, hopefully you have sales and you go after traditional type of venture capitalist funding. What I discovered is that the government has problems and they're trying to solve it. And that's what they're trying to do. And they want to keep the US as a leading edge of technology. And that's why they're giving this money out, because they want us to continue that innovation and constantly moving forward. So the government gets something, society gets something, and us as entrepreneurs be able to forward our ideas forward. In a typical grant funding, it's the fundable potential. They're not looking at, hey, I already have customers. They're looking at that, you have this really cool idea. We like this idea. We think it has legs and we think it can help society. So we're willing to fund it. And then you have the fundable on performance. That's when you actually have sales. And that's time a lot of times when us as entrepreneurs, we go to raise capital and they say, well, what's your sales like? Well, it's just still an idea. And it's hard to get that funding when you don't have the sales. And that's kind of the first part is where that grants kind of help you get to that stage to get up to that level to where you have your first sales and you can start to move forward. And it's all about proof of concept, proof of research, proof of prototype, proof of customer wants. Now, this is a really interesting slide. We're going to break it up in two parts, the top above the red line and then below the red line. So let's talk about above the red line. So this is from a 2013 research report, and it shows that the VC funding on the seed, that's the early stage funding, which is sometimes called angel funding, that the government, SBIR, STTRs, that's the small business type of funding for research. That was like $2.3 billion. And the VC was only 1.6. So it shows that early money is really coming from a lot of the government funding programs to help us start businesses. Now, if you look below that line, there were 7,104 businesses that were funded between the SBIR and STTR. And compared to the VC seed, which is 408. So that's a 95% increase in the number of deals. And if anybody's ever went after funding for a venture capitalist, and you start to realize that they get inundated with all these applications, but they only pick one or two every year. So each fund you're looking at or you're pitching to, they're going to end up picking one or two companies, but yet, and they may have been pitched 200, 300, 400 different programs. It just the success ratio is much different compared to an SBIR, STTR type grant. And then if you add up the whole list of all, the VCC, the VC early, the expansion and later stage, that only adds up to 3,600 grants. So it's about 50% of that, early funding from the federal government programs. So it's a big difference. I started to see that and I go, okay, well, this makes much more sense to apply for these types of grants. And then there's different agencies. So when we say the government, it's actually broken up into different agencies, and every agency has funds to apply. And the Department of Defense has the biggest chunk. And when you think about defense, a lot of times I always thought about, armaments and guns and things like that, but it's actually, it covers the whole society. Because when you have forward bases, that need resources, let's say water or fuel or, if you can create those out of clean tech, like a biofuel that's local on site, or you can do some type of recycling on site, it just limits the cost of that forward operation. But even on base, how do we clean up our bases that have maybe chemical spills or new ways to train warriors or first responders in disaster recovery, or how can we get more communication? So it covers a wide selection of different items. And then you have, all the other agencies right there. But so if you can just start to look at different agencies, just don't focus on one, but start to move back forward. Like I'm heavily in agriculture, but I find more success in NSF and in the Department of Defense. So starting to play around with NASA a little bit too, just because of off-planet ideas. They're trying to think of off-planet strategies in the near future. The cycles. So there's a full cycles of when grants are out for different agencies. And you'll notice that NSF is pretty, straightforward. It's across almost the whole year. It actually is the whole year. Those last 3 months should be taken up. But there's different periods, and you can find this at that website down below, the WWR .sbir.gov's topics, and you'll find the whole gamut of SBIR grants that are out there. So key writing tips that I found. You want to take a screenshot of this one, definitely. There's a webinar put on by the Craft Writing Efficiency for Grants and Papers by Larry McNerney. He really talks about how to write for reviewers of grants, especially scientific type grants. So that way you have a better chance of winning that grant. And I really like that particular webinar. The second one, and you could just do the search, the Google search, and you'll be able to find it. The second tip is that the 424 worksheet, what I find is your budget. And instead of trying to fill out the forms online, because it's an online web portal where you put in all the different numbers, I usually create a spreadsheet, and I create my budget offline first, and then I'm able to move the numbers around and lock it in before I input it. Now, most of the grants are going to have two categories, which are really key that you want to think about. One is overhead, and I believe that's limited to 10%. And so you always want to take your overhead, because that could be applied to your overall operations. You don't want to say you have no overhead. Overhead is typically, your rent space and your phones and items like that. It kind of just lay over the overall grant monies that you're going to apply towards research. And then another one is a small business fee. So the small business fee is, once again, it's a fee that is given to you as an operation to manage your business as a profit. And I believe that's close to 7%. So you want to take those as your first line items to make sure you have that down. I'm going to stop for a second because I see a message here. Oh, yep, I see a thank you, Thomas, for putting that in there. The narrative is 15 pages. And if you have an academic partner, the academic partner could actually help you write that particular section, or you actually use it in collaboration. Like, I've been able to build up close to 20 different academic partners now. And so I bring in different teams as we're applying for grants and strategize on how to write it. I find it's easier to keep the writing team down to 2 or 3 individuals as compared to the whole group, but then each group member adds their specialty, a paragraph or 2 paragraphs. And you want to follow the grading rubric. The grading rubric is usually within the solicitation, and it kind of makes sure that you're covering all the elements so you don't miss any of them. But it's also easier for the reviewer to go down that rubric and say, okay, they address this issue, they address this one, they address, so it keeps make sure your grant is complete and you're not missing anything, so you won't get dinged any points on that. And then the abstract is a public document. So in that one, you don't want to put your secret sauce. You want to keep that one kind of vague and general. And, okay, this is what I'm trying to solve, but you don't give all the heavy details into it. So that's the one document you kind of want to be careful with. The other documents, you can state that it's proprietary information, it's non-disclosures and things like that. So sources. These are great sources to where you can find grants. The seed fund from NSF Gov. This one's going to give you the $305,000 on the phase 1 and then 1.2 million on the phase 2. So I highly recommend that everybody at least apply for the seed fund. It's a great application. It's only 2 pages for the preliminary application. That you kind of pitch the idea, and then if they like the idea, they say, okay, you have a full year to put in a full application. So that is a really nice grant. They have plenty of webinars. So once you sign up, you'll get on an email list of webinars of how to write your grant or what they're looking for. The different directors are talking constantly of what they're looking for. And I find it's a very easy process to actually apply for that particular grant. SBARs, you can still use academia. So it's typically a company applying for the grant just directly with your idea. As TTRs, you definitely need academic partners. They're looking more for stuff that has in the lab or has been discovered within academia and taking it out of there so that they can move it forward as a commercial product. SBAR.gov is the webinar we talked about earlier. Great source for getting you a full list. You could do a keyword search. I also recommend that you look at, so I'm in California, but I look at webinars put on by other groups in different areas, like this SBI workshop from Greenwood Consulting. Great webinar. It's out of Alabama. So they had some Alabama, influences, but it had NASA, had EPA on that particular webinar, had a number of good individuals to talk about how to apply for their particular agency and be successful. The website grants.gov is my go-to. I seem to find great opportunities on there constantly. And I'm actually working on a couple that I just found this last weekend. So, and that's it gives you all the agencies. The issue with grants.gov, or the way that you want to kind of protect yourself, is that you not only have the SBIRs, which is small business innovation research, is they'll have the regular full institutional grants. Those are really hard to win as a separate company. So you definitely need an academic partner that can apply with you and lead the research and lead that charge. So that's what I find with that particular site and those types of grants when you look at the bigger agency grants that aren't dedicated just to small business entities. The Energy California is a great source for state grants out of California. You don't necessarily have to be in California to win those grants. Cal Testbed is another great one. It's funded by the Energy Commission in California, and then Rocket Fund out of Caltech. Okay, so the challenges. So challenges are you have to sign up and get your company on board with the particular agencies. So you have to sign, and you have to do that ahead of time before you actually apply for the grants. Except for the NSF seed. NSF seed, you can apply for the pre-application, but before you do the full application, you need to sign up at these different websites. So you have sam.gov, research.gov, and sba.gov. And each one of them has their own portal and information that you need to load up. A challenge is what's called a unique identity ID. And you get that through your SAMS.gov, but it can't be a home. So they're going to go and they're going to, once you put in the address, it's going to go out and look at the addresses and say, okay, this is a residential or is this a business? So it has to be a business. In my particular case, we use a office or a hot desk at Fresno State at Blue Valley. And so that's the office address that I use. And you can do that with a lot of the different accelerators. They have hot desk or they have workspaces. So you use that as your central location for your office. So I talked about the NSF seed. So these are the 4 main paragraphs that you have to fill out. So if you can see, it's pretty simple. However you want to do it, so you got the technology innovation, explain the core risk related to that technology. What are you trying to solve? What are you trying to get over the hurdle to show that your idea is going to work. And you have the technical objectives, the market opportunity. You want to emphasize how it's going to keep the USA as a leadership in that global market of what you're trying to solve and how it benefits society. So that's kind of the keys with the market opportunity and the company and team. In our particular case, I bring in team members from academia research that I deal a lot with physics of how water moves through soil. And so that's where I round out my team. It's not somebody that I have on board, but it's individuals that I can reach out to as collaborators and part of the overall research R&D team. Prototype stage. So this is a tip. This is just an added to this particular presentation. You can go to a local university engineering department, and a lot of times they'll have a 3D printer and they're working on 3D printers. So in my case, I had an opportunity to go out to a commercial firm, pay $600, or I found the local university would do it for 25. So it's a big difference, between that when you're doing a startup. So that's kind of where I've been leaning to more and more as I move forward and I need engineering is I lean into the engineering departments because it helps the students work with their products, but in their type of schooling, but at the same time, it helps the local business move forward. The second location is a machine shop. Machine shop can do a production of one. You show them the idea. It's a good machinist. They can actually work out the little bugs and create a product for you. And then SBI research conducted on a commercial site. So when you get the grant and you have to you're doing your research, if you can find a commercial individual, somebody you're going to want to sell to and do the research on their side, it just helps speed the whole idea of where you at with your technical readiness level, the TLR. So you can go from, concept at 2, but by the time you're done with the research, you're already at 5 or 6 because you're on a commercial side, you're working with a commercial entity, and you're finalizing the bugs through the beta site. So another great way to reduce your costs doing this whole process is if you use students' involvements in any of your research. So students, sometimes there's on-campus grants that allow them to do the research for you as an intern, but it also helps them in their academic studies. So helps move forward the whole ecosystem. And that was it. That's what I have for you guys today. Let's see if there's.
Oh, we've got plenty to discuss on this. So you want to stop sharing your screen? Or actually go back to the one that had, the buckets of money that were out there, where it kind of came from.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think like that's really important because a lot of times, we meet a lot of entrepreneurs where they just need that, that first 100, $200,000 to be able to move their idea along. And honestly, if you don't have the right friends and family, that's really hard to come by. Now, what
I
impact did,
agree with you 100% with that, Thomas.
yeah,
That first 100,000 or 200,000, yeah. Instead, if you don't have friends and family, or if you borrow from friends and family, that's a liability. You have to
and
pay
it
that.
doesn't work. Yeah. Now you're at Thanksgiving dinner and, you know, now what impact or how have you been able to leverage your early stage grants at your company?
So it adds to your resume for your company. So if you say that you've won this grant and it's an NSF research grant, that carries a lot of weight. So when you go and you apply for the next grant, say, well, we won this and we discovered this and we're moving it forward. So it helps with the overall, company as your history, where you're getting your money, who's willing to invest into you and move your project forward.
I think that's really salient because I mean, you talked about having to have sales to go after VC. Uh, Being successful on a grant is another form of traction, another
Yeah.
form of validation that your product really, really works. And you highlighted something there is like sa- doing a successful grant or having good communication with the grant agency is really important to getting the next grant. When I worked evaluating people going through grants for Cal Seed, one thing that they have is how timely and how easy were they to work with. Um, and that really impacts whether someone is going to be, whether you want to give someone a grant later because um, they don't get to, keep money that that they don't spend. Um,
Yep.
that what was that 2.4 billion about there? They've got to get that out. Now, one thing on there you talked about is so working with universities. Often people, they find, trying to connect with a university somewhat difficult. Um, Share with some of your success about being able to go and connect with universities to save cost and deliver on a grant.
Um, so I reach out to the professors and I tell them the idea that I have and I want to collaborate with them. What what took me a while to figure out what's the motivator, right? And
Hmm.
motivator is that most university professors have a requirement of teaching a number of units. So in most cases, it's like 12 units. Anything above that, then it helps them offset their class time. So if they win a grant, they can actually buy down their class time so they can work on that research or that idea. Um, the biggest challenge with um, academia is but they actually want to work with commercial entities and have that collaboration because it looks good. They know it looks good on the grant, and they need to write in that I have this idea, but I don't know if it has commercialization. But now they're able to say, well, I have this idea. I'm working with this commercial partner, and we're collaborating. And here's my letters of support. So you start providing letters of support as a company to their research and you kind of just start to build that relationship. It starts to grow, on some of their interests, on your interests, and how it starts to match.
And I'd note that, like for entrepreneurs out there looking at doing this, that sounds like it does take time and patience and working with them. You're not going to be able to just unlock the keys to a professor's workspace on that. Um, One thing I was hoping also that I want to kind of pick your brain on there is actually why don't we stop sharing for now? You want to
Okay.
stop sharing? Is um You talked about team building and that you're you're rounding out a team for going out for a grant. Now, when you're bringing in the people for your team, a lot of the questions people have is kind of compensation. And when you're going the VC route, the private capital, it's like, oh, we're going to promise them equity. We're going to promise them this giant return later on. But you're going for a grant. Um, there is the hope that it becomes commercially um, successful, but I imagine there's some differences in there when you're building your team. So could you expand on how you built your team to go after a grant a little bit more?
Um, so I've been down this road before, and I I wasn't, and what I was doing is doing some very transformative. What I do is it completely breaks a lot of the traditional rules of agriculture, and so I didn't want to bring on other partners, other collaborators, and have them risk and or even promise stock that I didn't know was going to take off or not. So I really bootstrapped this a lot by my own. Um, the team members that I do have on board, they're either paid through a grant or through some basically that not in equity at all. Um, it's not that I don't want to share, it's just it was still risky.
Hmm.
That was the issue. I don't want it, to say, well, it didn't work out.
Yeah. All
Um,
right. It
now,
is, so I think it would be good to highlight. I know at least in Sacramento, and I'm sure throughout the state, there you can find local programs, whether it's at CSU Sacramento, SETA, Sacramento Employment Training Agency, I think, where they will pay for, the first part of of you getting employees on it. So look for those programs out there, like I think as Joseph said, the government, they have this money to spend and help us. And if you've ever spent time going and actually connecting with government agencies around this, in my experience, I don't know about yours, Joseph, they've been overly eager to talk with you,
Yeah.
typically. Um, so, they take their, I guess, so, they're very smart people that decided they wanted to go into public service. And, they didn't go there just for the paycheck. They went there out of a sense probably of duty.
Yeah.
Um,
To go back to the employee though, so I bring on student interns. That's where most of my regular staff is from. When I have a grant, when the grant funds my salary, funds other people's salaries, so that way, we can move forward on that particular product. When you have collaborators and research, the university, you're paying part of that professor's um, salary, but they're also being covered by the university. So you get acceleration on that particular individual. So
I'm going to give Gary Simon a chance to chime in here and ask a question.
yeah, so I put in the links, by the way, the slide deck. So anybody who wants to download that with all the links. So
There's some good stuff in there. Yeah. Gary?
There we go. Finally unmuted. So, I mean, in terms of looking back on your experience, Joseph, and boy, do we appreciate the things that you've told us here. But is there something more that you wish you would have done, or something more that people that are a little bit farther along, like it's yourself, that what's the new frontier here? What's the new information you've managed to encounter in the last 3 months or so?
um, I think the new frontier is motivating, what motivates that professor? If I would have just went out and reached out to more professors earlier, I think I would be a little bit farther along because that collaboration they start coming up with ideas. When they start to know that they have a commercial industry collaborator, they're coming up with ideas. They're hitting me with ideas. Hey, well, how about this or how about that? And so it kind of starts to accelerate the whole concept. The other thing that I've learned recently is that NSF. So I won an NSF seed grant, and I went for a second one, and I scored really high. But they say, we already gave you, money the first time. We're not. It's going to be hard pressed for us to give you money a second time, for even if it's another idea. So don't go after that same bucket for NSF seed. That was a tough lesson. The thing that do want to emphasize is that there's a time period here. So even if you turn in an application today, it won't get graded until, let's say, March, and you won't get funded until, let's say, June, July. So there's a long delay period before. So it's not, you can't put it in a grant and think, I need the money right away. You
Right.
always have to be planning. You always have to be putting the seed in and planting the seed so that sometime in the future, you're going to win that one. You're going to win the next one. You're going to win the next one. So we're at 600,000 now, which is not bad. 600,000 in non-diluted, just, here, we like your idea. Go out and show us you can do it. So,
No, absolutely. Well, I think you raise another very important point, particularly with the SBIR money. They have a quick pay program, and you can, in theory, ask for the entire amount on an SBIR on day one. But that's actually a little bit dangerous money management. And you do eventually have to provide backup that you spent all that money in ways that are appropriate for the contract. So I think your experience is, just ask for progress payments along the way. Don't get dazzled by the idea of getting all the money on day one.
yeah. Yeah, you hit that correct. And because when you go from phase one to phase two, they'll do an audit. They'll
Oh
say,
yeah,
how did you spend your money? Like, we want to see your books. And if you did spend it on the way that your budget has laid out, you're going to have to pay that back. And you're going to
yeah,
ding on the record that this is not a company we could probably trust
yeah.
with large amounts.
I think we all appreciate that they're leaning forward to make sure that we they don't get you in a cash crunch. But on the other hand, you have to realize there are consequences if you don't manage the money well and you fail the audit.
Yeah, with they one of the directors told me it was really good. He goes, "This is taxpayers' money. This is us as taxpayers giving money to research to entrepreneurs to create ideas, and you want to spend it correctly. You don't want to just go out and just dilly-dally. You have to answer to the taxpayers of the United States that why they gave you that money. So and
Yeah,
that's true. We got to think that great country we live in can collect and taxes and focus it in different directions to help accelerate, but we also have to respect that.
right.
So
And going
Well,
uh,
the other thing is
in front of
you've got some
congressional hearings.
very interesting irrigation technology that we'll come back and talk about in 25 when we have our series on water efficiency and water management and irrigation. So that's also a very important thing that you're doing there. Thomas?
All right. Any final thoughts or advice for people going after grants or in the startup community, Joseph?
no, I think I covered it. I covered the key elements. So just do it. The only thing I could say is just, especially the NSFC, the first preliminary, it kind of encourages you. So, do that first 2 pages. They say, yeah, we like this idea. That'll kind of spark your drive to go, okay, let's move forward. Let's put in an application.
Yeah. And I think that's go for it. And if you're trying to figure out where to start, reach out to us here at Clean Start. Check out the Wet Center down at Fresno State. There's a lot of people that are cheering for, these startups to go and take a chance and make it big. All
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
With that, I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping things up.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
Thanks, Joseph.
And I want to thank Joseph for joining us today and giving his time and putting together probably one of, the best slide decks I've seen on grants. And that's actually saying something. Because I think it clearly laid out the SBIR and STTR in a very simple way. So you can watch this again on YouTube, on LinkedIn, or you can go and check out his slides that we've shared. Also, thank you to our supporters. That's SMUD, Bloom Workspaces, Fresno State, the Wet Center, River City Bank, and Chico Start. And check out our next webinar, which is on the 21st, Mastering Climate Risk with the Climatographers. Also, this Thursday, Carbon Neutral Fuels Meetup at Bloom. And later this year, I think it's actually going to be on the 11th, our holiday power up party. And if you want to hang out with us tomorrow at Sierra Nevada, go to Chico and check out Grow Tech Fest. And thank you all for attending and make sure you connect with us. That's all, folks. All right.